evening out there, my fellow backyard stargazers, and welcome to this episode of At the Eyepiece. I'm your host tonight, John Kramer. We're going to be observing the glories of the night sky here. We're going to be starting out tonight on M16. This is going to be the Eagle Nebula. This is located in the constellation. Let me bring up my Sky Safari program here that I can view. Sagittarius, I believe. Actually, we might be a little bit higher than that. Serpens, yes, we're going to be in the constellation Serpens. Now, where we are looking is pretty much towards the center of our galaxy here. As you can see from the Sky Safari app, we are looking almost due south. Um, Eagle Nebula is riding pretty high. Prominent constellation here is Scorpius. Then we have Sagittarius right here. And then, of course, the Eagle Nebula right up here. So, enough talk. Let's go ahead and check out our view here right at the eyepiece of our telescope. Give me 1 second, and we will switch back. A little rusty here on the broadcasting and the processes that I have to do. So bear with me here. All right. So this is our live view right here. So talking about a telescope, tonight we are using the Explorer Scientific 8-inch f3.9 Newtonian with a ZWO 294 color camera. Yes, we're using color tonight. And we were doing that so that we can see the splendors of the night sky here in full color. And I think it's going to be pretty impressive. So let's go ahead and make sure that I have my guiding going. And right now we can see this in the eyepiece of our telescope at 1.7 seconds, which is a faint glow. We are going to, of course, increase that. Let's go with a full 45 seconds. So let's go ahead and get our first 45-second exposure here, and we'll share the night sky live. So coming up in 45 seconds is going to be the Eagle Nebula. Now, bear in mind, as we build this image up, it should improve as we are doing what we call stacking our images. 45-second exposure, and then another 45-second exposure is going to be added towards that, et cetera, et cetera. What it's doing is it's decreasing the noise, increasing the signal to noise ratio of the image, and thus going to be improving the view. So let's take a look back to our Sky Safari app here and get some information on this object in particular. So we are going to be going right here near the Eagle Nebula, a beautiful rich star field, by the way. Actually, we have our first image up. If I can go ahead and get this thing to click on the Eagle Nebula, except for every other object here. There we go. So that's what we are going after. Let's go back to our live telescope view. Here's our live view. This is our first 45-second exposure. Let's go ahead and auto stretch that and see what we got. All right, so we're getting kind of green, but that's perfectly normal. Let's go ahead and put our object name here up at the top, and we will start stacking. There we go, our live stack. So you can see just a little bit of our capture program running there at the bottom. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of change in here so that you don't see as much as that. reset our stack properties too. Whoa. Nice white screen. There we go. That'll be enough. Just trying to get the scaling right for us. Here we are. I think that'll be fine. And then this way we can also see some of the image from the Sky Safari app. So hopefully this is coming through okay on the YouTube channel here, because you can kind of start to make out. Switch my microphone around here because it is quite warm and I definitely need the AC running in here. All right, so let's do a histogram stretch on that. All right, coming through a little bit red, but we're going to tweak that down. And there's our Eagle Nebula. All right, so let's begin to make some changes here as the stack adds up. Darken this background a bit to bring out all that beautiful nebula. Pretty little open cluster there as well, down to the 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock position there. All right, that's coming through pretty good. We got a pretty good balance here of color. Maybe a tad more red. We'll drop our red just a bit. And there we go. Let's do just a bit of a zoom here for us. And there is our Eagle Nebula, folks. Now that's a stack of 4 45-second exposures live. Can't get any closer to live than being literally at the eyepiece. Now, of course, if you step up to a telescope and you look at this object, you're going to go ahead and see it as a colorless, nebulous cluster of stars. When you step up to an eyepiece of a telescope, getting into, say, 12-inch aperture or above, then you're going to go ahead and begin to pick up some of those subtle features of the eagle itself. Now, they also call, you might recall a Hubble image back in the day called the Pillars of Creation. That is when this was taken here of the Eagle Nebula there back with the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, they also call these, I believe, elephant trunk, not to be confused with the elephant trunk nebula, but elephant trunks as far as what this region is that we're looking at. The sharp contrast of the dark regions. This is a star forming region, and it's basically the solar winds from these stars being created that is creating all of this eagle shape there that you see about center in the screen. You'll be able to pick that again out visually with a large scope, but you won't probably pick up any of the color unless you step up into a really, really sizable telescope. There's a good zoom in here of the nebula. The Eagle Nebula. This is M16, so this was the 16th object in the catalog for Charles Messier. This is also cataloged as IC4703, as well as the cluster itself is NGC 6611. Always love to have our Sky Safari app running on the side here. It's a wealth of information. All right, let's go back to our full res view here. We could probably go a little bit darker on our background. Just a tad there. That's pretty good. So we have 8 stacks so far of the Eagle Nebula coming through very, very nicely tonight. This is a rich area of our galaxy. Of course, looking towards our galaxy, it's a rich area of stars and nebula, etc. You might recall back in the few months ago, it was galaxy season. We're looking outside of our galaxy for those regions of the night sky, which, of course, getting out of the dust that is naturally going to obscure the views of the galaxies. Now, this season, summertime, is definitely galaxy or our galaxy time, the Milky Way time, and we're able to pick up some of the objects much, much closer. Speaking of close, let's see if we can determine how far our Eagle Nebula is. Oh, it looks like it's only 5.7 thousand light years away. This whole region, let's take a moment here to go over on our Sky Safari program. Let's take a look at that primarily. So we're going to minimize our view here for a second. So here's our Sky Safari app. As you can see, just a rich area of objects. We're going to hit all 3 of these objects here. The Omega Nebula we are on right now. I'm sorry, the Eagle Nebula we are on right now, but we are also going to go to the Omega Nebula, also commonly called the Swan Nebula. And if you were to step outside right now, face directly south, and it's clear, of course, out, you will definitely see the very prominent summertime constellations of Scorpius there, Sagittarius the teapot, and we are surfing right here above the main teapot area here at the Eagle Nebula. Beautiful region to sweep, even with a pair of binoculars. So I encourage you, if you've got a decent pair, 7x50s even, go out there and check this out. All right, we are going to save our view here before we move on. But I'll leave this up to enjoy the Eagle Nebula in all of its glory. In fact, all right, so that did save. Let's go back to our view here. And I'll show you our live view of what we're looking at, side by side with the Sky Safari image. Now our image is flipped to 180, so just kind of keep that in mind. Might be able to rotate that around. Let me see if I can do that. Oh my, we're not even running with our camera cooler running. I need to get that started too. So right now we're running an uncooled 294. Should have been running that cooler before we even started broadcasting, but I was so excited to get going that I forgot. So we're getting a few extra hot pixels, no doubt, than what we would be if we were running an old cool camera. There we go. Scoot that over a bit. All right, enjoy the view. We going to play a little background music for you as we make sure that we're getting our other computer connected on up to monitor the YouTube channel itself. So bear with me and enjoy for the time being. Stream music from pretzel.rocks. There we go. This is perfect title for a song, Telescopic by Big Giant Circles. The ambient station from pretzel.rocks. All right, and yes, we are live broadcasting these objects brought to you right here on YouTube, as close to live as you can get. This is a telescopic view from an 8-inch Newtonian with a color ZWO 294 camera. Right now we are on the Eagle Nebula M16, so enjoy. Done a pretty good job here of stacking this live image. Let's go ahead out to our full res view. See how that's coming through for you. So this is our full resolution view there. Let's identify that open cluster that you can see over there to the lower left. Let's go ahead and turn our ambient music down for a moment here. This way we can go ahead and hear me when I'm talking. So this is our full res view. Beautiful shot. So far 25 stacked 45-second exposures. I'm going to go ahead and save this view. And then let's identify, using our Sky Safari app, the lovely open cluster that we look like we've got captured there. And that looks like it's kind of an obscure one. Trumpler 32. So let's go ahead and show you what I'm referring to here. Let's go back to our primary view of our Sky Safari app. So as you can see, in this view, we're kind of flipped. The telescope view is flipped, that is. So I got my orientation with the Sky Safari app by looking at where the eagle basically is pointed. And since it's pointing in that general direction, looks like the cluster of stars that we're picking up is right here, the Trumpler 32, 12th magnitude open cluster appearing in the constellation. That's 5,600 light years away from our solar system as well, but it's a pretty nice little cluster actually. Besides the beautiful cluster that is part of the Eagle Nebula itself, That's coming through quite well. So let's go back to our main view here, our telescopic view. So enjoy that here for the time being, because our next object coming up is going to be, I think we're going to go over to the Swan Nebula, or they also call that the Omega Nebula. So we're going to go just a little bit further directly south here. Let's go back to our sky safari so that you can kind of get an idea of where we're going to be headed to next. So as you can see, Eagle Nebula there at the top of our screen. We're going to go just a few degrees south to the Omega Nebula. This is also commonly called the Swan Nebula. Again, if you were outside with a pair of binoculars looking due south and sweeping this region of the night sky, you would definitely be able to see something in this region itself. Small nebulous clouds, that would be the Eagle Nebula as well as the Omega Nebula. Rich in open clusters. Of course, the Sagittarius star cloud isn't really an open cluster, but it is a beautifully rich location of the Milky Way galaxy. You got a couple of open clusters here, and they happen to be Messier open clusters, M18 and M25. Summertime is a wonderful time for sweeping with a pair of binoculars. It really works out great. All right. Let's go ahead and we will stop here on our beautiful Eagle Nebula. Let's switch back to our telescope screen. There we go. This is our live view of our Eagle Nebula. Let's make some minor adjustments here. Just get a little bit brightened up, just a tad. And that's probably a bit too much, so I'm glad I grabbed. As you can see, see how the nebula extends over to the upper left as well as to the upper right. It's quite a rich region. Ooh, I like that one too. Let's go ahead and do a quick save before we move on. Hopefully this is not echoing too bad. I think I had an audio setting there that I really didn't want to have it echo as much as it is. So hopefully the audio is coming through just fine for you. All right, we are going to pause our guiding. We are going to pause our screen here. And we're going to go to our next target. Really wish I had just one more USB port free, because I could plug in the great stream deck that I have to help move and do the workflow of something like this much better than what I'm doing, but unfortunately I do not have a free port. So we are limited to what we have, but that's okay. All right. So, as the Sky Safari app, you can see here, we are going to be looking at now Messier 17, which is listed here as the Omega Nebula, also commonly called the Swan. I prefer the Swan myself. While we are waiting for our initial view to come up here, let's go ahead and talk about this fine object. So as you can see, we're just a little bit further south than the Eagle Nebula. This one is right at the border of the constellation Sagittarius. Sagittarius being the main teapot asterism that you're seeing there with the orange lines connecting. So a very easy constellation to pick out. This was discovered in 1746 by Charles. Oh, wow, look at that one. That just came up. I have to flip back to the view here. This is the live view. This is our first grab. Look at that. That's our first grab of the Swan Nebula. 45-second exposures. You can clearly see, at least I can, the swan-like appearance of this nebula. Very, very nice. So let's go ahead and let that get us stacking. And I'm gonna just stop yapping and let you enjoy the view here for a bit. Beautiful shot. And I do apologize if the AC is being picked up here on the audio, but boy, it's been a hot and humid day, and I definitely need the air running. Just physically, it's located right next to me where I'm doing the broadcasting from. So I do apologize for that, but look at the beautiful view. We actually have a way to... You know what? I am not going to do that. That is really coming through quite nice. Maybe just a tad on the dark side. See if we can pick up some other changes here. All right, it's a beautiful shot. Once again, we have our object description there on the left of our screen. That is brought to us through our Sky Safari app. And we have our beautiful object here. I can make it just a little bit larger. Of course, I'm kind of limited on the real estate that I have available from the screen. But let's do that view, because that at least gives you some information too on the magnitude, distance, about 4,200 light years away from us. Let's grab a save before anything bad happens. Again, this is live, so we don't want any clouds to move through our view, any mount issues before we save a beautiful shot like that. And there we go. So we've got 7 of those saved. So once again, let's just get an idea of where we are looking here in the night sky. Let's go back to our Sky Safari. We are almost facing directly due south right now. You can see here the horizon, simulated horizon. Very prominent Scorpius, Sagittarius, and then just above the teapot asterism that makes up Sagittarius, right on the edge of the constellation boundary is where we are pointed right now. That rectangle basically represents the camera view of what we're sharing live. And what we're sharing live is right here. It's so weird that I cannot seem to scroll. All right, sit back and enjoy this view while I decide where we're going to go to next. Right here at the eyepiece. All right, what's going to be coming up next here before we get these objects too far, what's called past the meridian or close to the meridian, we're going to go for something a little bit different. Well, it's still a nebula. We're going to go for the Trifid Nebula coming up next, right here at the eyepiece. So let's go ahead and get our quick screen grab here. All right, let's pause, clear, and go to the Trifid Nebula next. So what's really neat about this one is that it's got some blue. And blue, when you're talking about nebula, generally means that you're talking about a reflection nebula. So red is generally going to be in an emission. Blue is going to be a reflection, but you're also going to have clearly defined, very dark nebula region here within this particular object. So let's go ahead and minimize this so that we can see our Sky Safari app, determine where we are in the night sky. We're actually scooting further and further south. And again, we're still right in Sagittarius, right above the Teapot asterism there, getting closer to it. And we're right in this region. So let's see, and here's our first live view of the Trifid Nebula. Now this is, bam, this is Messier 20. So this is, for those that are unfamiliar, Charles Messier, with prolific comet hunter in the 1500s, decided to make a list of objects that, to his eye and with his equipment, kind of tripped him up, and he didn't want to confuse objects in the night sky with comets because that was a very popular thing at the time. So he made this list, and that's basically what we're referring to. This is number 20 on his list, Messier 20 or M20. We also have a designation in a catalog, the new general catalog of 6514. So let's get a little bit more view here. Let's zoom this in a bit. Definitely picking up everything that we can see there. We got the blue reflection, we got the red emission, and of course, going right through the red emission nebula there. Actually, it's separating it quite nicely too between the blue and the red. Is the dark nebula. Very, very neat object. Now, being that it's a dark nebula, if you had a telescope, I would say even 4-inch aperture telescope, you would probably be able to pick this up. Now, again, we're not able to pick up color in a telescopic view unless you're talking a telescope very large, probably well above 12, in a very, very dark sky. But you would be able to see a gray wisp of nebula, no doubt here, and some of this dark nebula dissecting that. And this is about as live for astronomy as you can get. 45-second exposures brought this object into the view for us here, and it's looking pretty darn good, if I don't mind me saying. Here's our full resolution. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I do want to apologize if you are on the YouTube channel and you are doing anything in the chat. I can't get my other computer connected to the network right now. That's the computer that I usually use to kind of monitor the chat, respond, etc. So if I'm missing you, I do apologize. I'm trying to refresh the screen periodically and check back from time to time. So let's slide over our live view just a bit so that we can kind of split screen here with the information there on the left from our Sky Safari app, and of course our live view right over there to the right. All right, so we have about 11 stacks going on 12 stacks. That's a total exposure time so far, integration for our object here, Messier 20, the Trifid Nebula. It's about 8 minutes of integration. So we've been doing real good. Now, before we get to um, an imaginary line in the night sky called the meridian, I want to try to get one more object in. So we are going to save our view here of the Trifid Nebula. And the reason that I want to get to this next object before we get to what we call the imaginary line that separates the eastern half of the night sky from the western half of the night sky is because in the type of telescope that I'm using, specifically the mount, which happens to be an Ioptron IEQ Pro 45, any well, not really any, some of the high-end German equatorial mounts can actually track past the meridian, but I don't want to have to do what's called a meridian flip, and I want to get this object in before I have to do that. So let's take a moment, say goodbye here to our beautiful Trifid, and let's go real close by to Messier 8, which is going to be the Lagoon Nebula. Very, again, prominent emission nebula with an open cluster associated with it. Let's go ahead and clear our view here. And this is M8, so number 8 on Charles Messier's list. So let me show you what I'm referring to here in our Sky Safari app by meridian. So you see this line here, that green bar? This is the meridian line. So with the German equatorial mount, most of them, you have to go ahead and do what's called a meridian flip. It's tracking on the eastern half of the night sky, but then once you get on the other side of the meridian, it has to rotate the scope around and have the scope on one side with the weights on the other. So right now the scope is on the western half and the weights are on the eastern half. With a meridian flip, it's going to be vice versa. So it's a complete flip around of the scope, and I don't want to have that happen right now. So let's go ahead back to our Lagoon Nebula, and oh, wow, check this out. Here we go. The Lagoon Nebula live right here. 1 45-second exposure. Big nebulous region of the night sky. You can see a couple of dark nodules within this nebula. Certainly the very prominent dark nebula to there, the vein that separates it. Beautiful open cluster too associated with it as well. All right, so let's let that stack. We're going to tone our view just a bit. Get a little bit more contrast going there. There we go. This is our live view. Here's our full resolution screen here, moved over just a bit for you. Hopefully that's coming through in the live stream nice and clear. Beautiful Lagoon Nebula. Zoom in just a bit. sit back and enjoy the wonders of our universe. And I'm so glad you were able to hop on and share either this live for the live stream or this recorded session. Either way, you're getting great views of the cosmos. All right, what will be coming up here next at the eyepiece is a different object that we haven't seen yet tonight. This next one's going to be one of my favorites. So we've spent some time here covering mostly some open clusters with associated nebula, right? We've looked at emission nebulas. We've even seen some reflection nebula, and we've also shared in some dark nebula. Next is going to be a type of cluster called a globular cluster, and it's one of my favorite objects types, especially to view at the glass eyepiece of a telescope because they're just a lot of fun to go ahead and tease out the detail and see what level of stars that you could see into the core or the outer fringes, etc. It's a very, very neat object to see, and because they're stellar or star-like, they're generally pretty good to hold up even through some moderate light pollution. So the object in that we're going to go to here next is going to be probably one of my favorites. It's got to be the top three globular clusters for me. It's going to be M2. Sorry, M22. This is in the constellation Scorpius, so we are still, as you can tell, lots of beautiful objects in Scorpius. So we're still hanging out in Scorpius. And this is going to be pretty neat, no doubt, as well. So we'll get real close to the meridian flip, so I want to make sure we scoot the scope a little bit further east. And that's why we're going to not spend too much more time here on the lagoon, but head on over to a different class of object here with M22. All right, so let's go ahead and show you what you have in store here. Coming up right here live at the eyepiece in a moment is that object that you see there to the left, Messier 22, also a catalog 6656 in the new general catalog there. This is a rich open cluster. I'm sorry, globular cluster. In fact, the first time I've seen it with a telescope, I actually thought it was a super dense open cluster. But no, it was an actual globular cluster. All right, a few more seconds here and we'll have our M22 on up. Now, globulars are very cool for a number of reasons. You have very rich globulars, you have very loose globular clusters. Very, uh, I believe they're called classes. I believe there's 1 through 15, and these denote the different classifications of the globulars. And what that classification is associated with is how densely packed the cores are. There's our M22, folks. Look at that. Just phew, eyepiece full of stars, right? Now, globulars are also some of the oldest objects in the universe. That's why a lot of their stars are going to have a very distinct kind of orange hue to them. Because many of the stars, being that they're so old, again, they're some of the oldest objects in the universe, they're going to be red giants. However, one of the coolest things, and we might be able to pick this out a little bit later, I'm not sure, on a different globular cluster, but sometimes there's some clusters that have some blue stars in them. And this is very recent exposure that I've gotten to what's called blue stragglers. And I didn't really notice it before until I used a color camera doing electronically assisted astronomy such as this. Being that they're really, really some of the oldest objects in the universe, the um, evolution of the stars you would expect to be red giants, while some of them would be blue. And I was like, why am I seeing prominently blue stars in this old object? Well, it's because they're blue stragglers. And reading up a little bit more on it, it was just basically where two stars within this globular cluster, because there's hundreds of thousands, even possibly millions of stars within these globular clusters. If they combine basically, uh, or one pulls material from the other, it kind of gets rejuvenated and it's going to burn much hotter and thus appear more blue. So that's a quick run through of blue stragglers and some of the neat aspects of the globular clusters. Now, I don't think the Sky Safari app does give us the classification here on our M22. It's 10,000 light years away. It's magnitude 5, so you could actually see this visually. If your skies were transparent enough and dark enough, yeah, I cannot scroll down for some reason with Sky Safari tonight. I think I'm just doing too much on the computer. All right, let's do a little bit of color balancing here on our globular cluster. I'm going to tone down the green a little bit, and I'm going to up the blue just a tad to get our colors more balanced. And that's a pretty good balancing act there for our color. And that is, so far we've got 6 45-second exposures of M22. Observing this with an 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain, moderate, moderate power usually, a little over 100 times magnification, 80 to about 120 is usually the sweet spot. Beautiful, beautiful globular cluster. Keep wanting to say open cluster, but nope, this is a globular cluster. Sit back and enjoy the view here while we play some more music here, thanks to Pretzel.rocks. So here's our beautiful M22 globular cluster. A little bit zoomed in, actually 50% zoom right now, so we can better see it a little bit. I'm going to let this object go, and then tonight we are going to wrap on a completely different type of object. Might have kind of let the cat out of the bag there, but it's going to be M27, which is going to be a wonderful planetary nebula. That's going to be coming up next right here at the eyepiece. So enjoy the view until then. right, our go-to's a little off on this particular object. It was a little bit of a haul from M22, so I'm just trying to get it centered up. All right, coming up next is going to be the Dumbbell Nebula M27. This is a planetary nebula. It's in the constellation Vulpecula, also called the Apple Core. And there it is. You can clearly see why they would call it the Apple Core, right? Because, man, in this view, it really does look like the core of an apple. Let's take a look at what our Sky Safari program looks like. Clearly see that's exactly what we're picking up. So where are we pointed in the night sky for this particular object? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at our Sky Safari app in a bit more detail. So we're going to let this image stack up a bit. Obviously, there's our M27. It's a beautiful planetary nebula. Looks like it was discovered in 1764. Now, through a very, very small telescope, you'll be able to pick up some of this color. And being that it's definitely not star-like, more of a round appearance, you can see why early on in the early advent of astronomy in general with telescopes that they had called these planetary nebula. Obviously, they have nothing to do with planets, but they were ball-like and circular, and they had different colors associated with them, so that's why they kind of called them that. But let's take a look here. All right, so let's hide our display view here just for a moment, and we'll show you where we're looking. We're really further up. We're near a prominent constellation called the Northern Cross, or Cygnus the Swan. Almost directly overhead, but not quite. We are still in the general vicinity. You can see Sagittarius down there. And of course, Vulpecula is a very dim constellation overall. Now, you do have one prominent star here that can help you locate it. Of course, Altar, but that's in the constellation Aquila. But at least it will give you some guidance. I would say if you look at Altar and what is this, Deneb, I believe. No, Alberio. I should have known that. Gosh, Deneb's, I think Deneb is this one up here. Yeah, that's Deneb up there. This is Alberio at the head of the Cygnus the Swan. But there is our Dumbbell Nebula. Zooming in here, and here's our view. And of course, that's the view from Sky Safari. What's our view live look? Boom. Right there. I don't think I'm even guiding, darn it. Yeah, I might have to restart this whole... Let's do that. I'm going to restart this stack here. I wasn't even guiding. Let's go ahead and get our guiding going again. We'll bring up this view. Zoom in a bit too. This should do quite well with zoom. We'll darken our background just a bit too. All right, that is a single 45-second exposure. There's our background darkened up a little bit for us, making that more appealing. And that is our live view, the Dumbbell Nebula. Beautiful planetary nebula in Vulpecula. So what you're seeing there is essentially the outer shell of a star that's been pushed off by the stellar winds as the star was going from essentially one phase to another. I believe from a red giant to a white dwarf. And the glow that you're seeing, the distinct greenish blue and red there, are literally the outer layers of that star pushed off from the stellar wind. And this continues to grow and expand over millions and millions of years. Planetary nebulae are very, very cool. They have such a wide variety of shapes, very unique shapes too, mind you, out there in the night sky. Another very famous one is the Ring Nebula, which I don't think we'll get to tonight. We'll probably wrap it up here on this colorful M27 Dumbbell Nebula. You can definitely see the core though, this apple core, if you will, outlining here with the mouse, visually through a telescope. I would say, 8 is going to do pretty well. You're not going to get really the outer layers, these lobes here, unless you step up to a much larger instrument. Dark skies, of course, always helps. But you can also see this with a pair of binoculars. It's going to be a very small, tiny patch of gray. Let's go with our full resolution image here. Give you an idea of the surrounding star field. A little bit heavy on the blue here with our colors, so let me do a little bit of color balance here in a second, just to tone our blue down a bit. Although it's coming through really nice. I actually kind of like it with a little bit of the blue cast. Let's see how this comes through. Look at that, really picking that up, isn't it? Again, folks, you can step outside, clear night, pair of binoculars, and see this object for yourself. Granted, you're not going to be able to pick up the color as vividly here, but you're definitely going to go ahead and see it as a pale, misty circle. All right, sit back and enjoy the view. All right, I sure hope you have been enjoying the views here tonight live at the Eyepiece. If you have, and you haven't already, give me a like. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can go ahead and know when we're doing any other broadcasts. Of course, weather-wise, it's so hard to be able to plan these types of events, so it's pretty much just if it's clear and I have the availability, I'll be broadcasting. It's pretty rare living in Middle Tennessee that I'll be able to go ahead and say, hey, Wednesday night, 9 p.m., I'll be broadcasting because you never know what the weather's going to be. So make sure you subscribe. If you have any particular object types that you would like to see the next go around, I'm open to it. Put something in the comments there. And the next time we broadcast, I may very well go ahead to that object, if of course it's visible, and share it online live just for you. So this will be a wrap for tonight's episode of At the Eyepiece. Thanks everybody for stopping in, and make sure that if you're watching this from a recorded session, again, make sure you hit the like if you like it and subscribe button. You can also follow us right there at theeyepiece.org. And of course, we're on Facebook. So until next time, clear skies, everybody. And I sure hope to see you here, right here, at the Eyepiece.